They thought she was just a nurse. No rank, no weapon, just scrubs and a medical bag. When the helicopter went down, the SEAL team braced for the worst. Because a non-combatant in a kill zone usually means one thing: someone won't make it out alive. But when bullets started tearing through the wreckage, the woman in seat 4 didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She dragged wounded men through fire. She decompressed a collapsed lung under gunfire. And when the team ran out of ammo, she picked up a rifle. What the SEALs didn't know was this: the line between a healer and a warrior isn't morality, it's timing. This is the story of a nurse they tried to protect, and the operator who saved them all. The Chinook's rear ramp was half open, just enough to let the desert air claw its way inside. It smelled like dust and hot metal, hydraulic fluid and sweat baked into Kevlar. The rotors hammered the sky so hard, it felt like the sound was pressing down on everyone's chest. Senior Chief Jack Rourke sat forward on the webbing bench, elbows on knees, helmet tilted just enough to keep his eyes on his team. 8 men. Faces hardened by years of places that never made the news. They checked weapons out of habit more than necessity. Mag seated, chamber clear, selector safe. Rituals that calmed the mind before the drop. And then there was the woman in seat 4. She sat apart, knees together, a medical rucksack cinched tight against her chest, as if it might float away if she let go. No unit patch, no trident, just a red medical cross slapped onto her sleeve with Velcro. Her uniform looked new, too clean, too stiff, the kind of fabric that hadn't yet learned how to crease itself around a body under stress. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look anything at all. "Eyes up," Rourke barked into the intercom, his voice slicing through the rotor wash. "We're 2 minutes out. Intel says the LZ is quiet." A few men snorted. Intel always said that. Rourke's gaze slid inevitably to seat 4. "And listen up," he continued, slower now. "We have a contractor on board. Medical only. Non-combatant. Her name is Avery Cole. She does not engage. She does not leave cover. If she gets so much as a paper cut, command will have my ass mounted on a plaque." A ripple of low chuckles moved through the bench. "Moose," Rourke said, pointing without looking. "You're on rear security. Jenkins, you stick near Cole. Babysitting duty." Jenkins, broad as a refrigerator and permanently chewing something unidentifiable, glanced sideways at Avery and smirked. "Roger that, Chief," he said. "Don't worry, ma'am. Just stay behind the men with guns. If things get loud, cover your ears." Avery didn't react. She was tightening a tourniquet strap, fingers moving with calm precision. Not rushed, not shaky, methodical. The strap clicked into place, perfectly aligned, as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Rourke felt an irrational flicker of irritation. She looked bored. "You good there?" he snapped. Avery finally looked up. Her eyes were pale, gray-blue, almost colorless in the low light. "I'm good, Chief," she said evenly. "Rule of thumb. Stay low, don't die. Patch whatever leaks." A couple of the men laughed. Rourke didn't. "Civilians," he muttered, turning away. The mission was supposed to be simple: secure a wounded VIP, an asset who'd decided the other side paid too late and died too young. Local hospitals were compromised. Extraction by air. Get in, get out. Fast and clean. That was the theory. Rourke didn't like that they'd sent a civilian nurse instead of a corpsman or a PJ. The file had been thin. Specialist medical contractor. Trauma experience. No mention of where or how. Just a clean background and a contract signature. He'd seen that before. It usually meant someone who worked in climate-controlled tents, handing out IV fluids and aspirin. The helicopter shuddered. The pilot's voice crackled in their ears. 30 seconds. The men leaned forward, muscles coiling. Safety selectors clicked. The mood shifted, humor evaporating like water on steel. Rourke glanced back one last time. Avery had closed her eyes. For a moment, he thought she was praying. Then he noticed her breathing. Slow, measured, in through the nose. Hold, out through the mouth. Not panic, control. "Zone is hot," the pilot suddenly shouted. "Repeat, zone is hot! Small arms fire!" The first impact sounded like hail on a tin roof. Then the Chinook lurched. Metal screamed. Warning lights strobed red. The world tilted violently to the left. "RPG!" someone yelled. Rourke didn't remember the sound of the explosion. He remembered the pressure, like a giant hand slamming his skull against the inside of his helmet. The floor disappeared. The sky spun. Brown earth and blue air traded places. Then everything went black. Rourke came back choking on dust. The taste of copper flooded his mouth. His ears rang, a high, thin whine that drowned out everything else. He tried to move and pain shot up his left leg. "Sound off!" he croaked. "Status!" "I'm up!" Jenkins shouted from somewhere nearby. "Pilot's down!" Moose yelled. "Pilot's KIA!" "Hawk's hit!" another voice screamed. "Legs fucked! Can't move!" Rourke shoved debris aside and dragged himself upright. The rear of the Chinook was torn open, twisted like a crushed can. Sunlight poured in, blinding. Outside, muzzle flashes stitched across the square. They had crashed in the center of a village, a kill box. "Contact front!" Jenkins roared, his machine gun hammering back, the recoil pounding dust into the air. Rourke scanned wildly. "Where's the nurse?" he shouted. No answer. His stomach dropped. Then he saw movement through the smoke. A figure crawled free of the wreckage, dragging a heavy medical pack with one hand. Her face was smeared with grease and blood, hair torn loose from its tie. Avery Cole. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't frozen. She was moving, low, deliberate, toward cover. "Get down!" Rourke bellowed. She ignored him. Instead, she hooked an arm under the unconscious co-pilot's vest and began to drag him, dead weight, nearly twice her size, toward a shattered concrete wall. Rourke stared. Then he ran. Bullets kicked dirt at his heels as he slid in beside her. "You hit!" he demanded, grabbing for her shoulder. She shoved his hand away. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was steady. "He's not. He's got tension pneumothorax." Rourke blinked. "What?" "Collapsed lung. Pressure's crushing his heart. I need 30 seconds. "We don't have 30 seconds," Rourke snapped, firing 2 rounds over the wall. Avery was already moving. She ripped open the flight suit, fingers unerringly finding the second intercostal space. A needle flashed. A sharp hiss cut through the gunfire. The co-pilot gasped, chest rising. Rourke felt something cold slide down his spine. That wasn't textbook calm. That was practiced. He looked at her again. Really looked. As she withdrew the needle, the sleeve of her undershirt rode up for half a second. Just long enough for him to see it. A thickened scar along her trigger finger. Not a cut. Not an accident. A callus built by years of pressure and recoil. Avery tugged the sleeve back down before anyone else noticed. She met Rourke's eyes. "Chief," she said quietly, "we're going to need better cover." Behind them, something heavy roared to life. An engine, low and angry. Rourke turned. A pickup truck rolled into view at the far end of the square, a mounted weapon rising in its bed like the jaw of a predator. Rourke swore, and somewhere deep in his gut, an impossible thought took root. That woman in seat 4 is not who she says she is. The first burst from the truck-mounted gun hit the wall like a sledgehammer. Concrete exploded outward in a spray of white shards. Rourke ducked instinctively, helmet ringing as fragments ricocheted off his plates. The sound wasn't just loud, it was final, a deep mechanical roar that swallowed everything else. "DSHK!" Moose shouted. "Heavy gun, 200 meters!" The wall shuddered again. A chunk the size of a brick disintegrated inches from Rourke's face. They were pinned. "Moose, suppress!" Rourke yelled. "I am suppressing!" Moose roared back, his machine gun barking in angry bursts. The rounds sparked uselessly off the truck's armored shield. The enemy gun never even hesitated. Behind them, Hawk groaned, pale and slick with sweat. His leg was splinted, blood soaking through the wrap despite Avery's careful work. Avery crouched low, one hand braced against the wall, eyes locked on the street beyond the dust cloud. She wasn't looking at the chaos. She was looking through it. "Ammo check!" Rourke barked. "2 mags!" Jenkins yelled. "1 belt, half!" Moose answered. Rourke swallowed. He ran the math in his head and didn't like the answer. Another burst hit. The wall cracked. A spiderweb of fractures raced outward. "This position won't hold," Jenkins shouted. "I know," Rourke snapped. Avery shifted beside him. "Chief." "Not now." "That gun's walking its fire," she said calmly. "They'll collapse this wall in under a minute." Rourke glanced at her despite himself. "You got a better idea?" She didn't answer immediately. She leaned out just enough to watch the gun's rhythm. Short burst. Pause. Long burst. Adjust. Repeat. Her gaze flicked to the truck's cab, then to the rooftop behind it, then, almost reluctantly, to Hawk's rifle lying in the dirt. The DMR. Rourke followed her line of sight. "No." Avery looked at him. It wasn't defiant, it wasn't pleading, it was practical. "If that gun keeps firing," she said, "everyone here dies." "You're non-combatant," Rourke growled. "That rifle stays on the ground." Another burst tore a fist-sized hole through the wall. Hawk screamed as debris peppered his wounded leg. Avery flinched, just once. Then she moved. She crawled to Hawk, her body pressed low as rounds cracked overhead. She grabbed the DMR and dragged it back behind cover. Rourke reached for her arm. "Cole." She shrugged him off. "I'm borrowing it," she said. "I'll give it back." Jenkins stared at her. "Ma'am, you don't know how—" She popped the magazine, checked the chamber, and slid it back in with a solid click. The sound cut through the chaos. Rourke froze. That wasn't guesswork. Avery reached into her medical bag. For a split second, Rourke thought she was grabbing morphine. She pulled out a cylindrical object wrapped in sterile blue cloth. Metal glinted. "A suppressor?" Moose breathed. "What the hell?" Avery didn't look at him. She threaded it onto the barrel with smooth, practiced turns. No cross-threading, no hesitation. She settled the rifle on a chunk of rubble, adjusted the bipod, and peered through the optic. Her breathing changed. In, out, pause. Rourke felt the world narrow. "Cole," he said quietly, "put it down." She didn't. She nudged the scope, fingers spinning the turrets. "Full value wind," she murmured. "Left to right, light but steady." Jenkins shook his head. "This is insane." Avery leaned into the stock. Her posture shifted, shoulders squared, body bladed, cheek welded to the rifle. She didn't look like a civilian holding a gun. She looked like a solution. The heavy gun barked again. Avery squeezed. The suppressed shot was barely a cough. 200 meters away, the gunner's head snapped back. The DSHK fell silent mid-burst, its barrel dipping uselessly toward the dirt. For half a second, no one moved. The battlefield seemed to inhale. "Holy!" Moose started. Avery cycled the bolt. "Driver," she said softly. The man in the cab panicked, slamming the truck into gear. Avery fired again. The truck lurched, veered, and rolled to a stop against a low wall. Silence fell, thick, stunned. Rourke stared at the truck, then at Avery. She lowered the rifle just enough to meet his eyes. "You have about 10 seconds," she said. "They'll realize what happened." Rourke's training snapped back into place. "Move!" he shouted. "New position now!" Jenkins grabbed Hawk under the arms. Moose laid down covering fire at the stunned fighters scrambling for new angles. Avery rose from her firing position and moved, not running, not crawling, flowing from cover to cover, rifle tracking, eyes alive. A fighter burst from an alley, AK raised. Avery fired twice while moving. The man dropped. She didn't break stride. They crashed into the shell of a concrete building, slamming the door shut behind them. Jenkins shoved debris against it, panting. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old animals. Rourke turned on Avery. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. She knelt beside Hawk, already working, hands gentle now. "I'm keeping him alive. That's not what I asked." She tightened a bandage, checked Hawk's pulse, then finally looked up. Her eyes were steady. "I'm a nurse," she said, "and right now, that's enough." Outside, men shouted in a foreign language. Something thumped in the distance. Heavy, hollow. Avery's head snapped toward the sound. "Mortars," she said. Rourke felt the floor tilt beneath him. "How do you know?" Avery met his gaze. "Because," she said quietly, "this isn't over yet." The first round landed somewhere beyond the wall, close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Rourke exhaled slowly. He looked at the woman who wasn't supposed to exist in his kill zone. And for the first time since the crash, he realized the truth. If they were getting out of this alive, it wouldn't be because of the plan he'd brought in. It would be because of Avery Cole. The first mortar round landed close enough to knock dust from the rafters. The building groaned like an old animal waking from a bad dream. Hawk screamed as the floor vibrated beneath him, his hands clawing at nothing. "Easy," Avery said, already at his side. She pressed a hand to his shoulder, grounding him. "You're here. I've got you." Rourke braced himself against the wall as another explosion thudded somewhere outside. "They're walking it in," Moose said, adjusting fire. "Of course they are," Rourke muttered. He keyed his radio. "Bravo, actual to Overlord. Comms check." Static. Nothing. Jenkins slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. "They know exactly where we are." Avery's head tilted slightly, listening, not to the explosions, but to the spaces between them. She closed her eyes for half a second, counting. Boom. Pause. Boom. "They're bracketing us," she said. "South to north. Next one's closer." Right on cue, the third round hit so near the building that fragments punched through the outer wall, showering them with grit and concrete chips. Rourke swore. "We can't stay here. And we can't move with mortars falling," Jenkins shot back. "Pick one." Avery stood and moved to the narrow window slit, peering out through the dust. "Chief," she said, "they're not just guessing." Rourke joined her, staying low. He followed her gaze. At the far end of the street stood a 2-story concrete schoolhouse, the tallest structure in the area. On its roof, something thin and metallic caught the light. An antenna. Rourke's stomach tightened. A jammer? Avery nodded. Localized. Directional. That's why we can't raise air. Moose stared at her. You sure? She didn't look away. Yes. Another mortar landed. The ceiling cracked. Rourke weighed his options. They were bad. All of them. How do we kill it? He asked. Avery turned from the window. I go. Silence slammed down harder than the mortars. No, Rourke said instantly. Absolutely not. You're pinned, she replied. Hawk can't move. Jenkins and Moose are your base of fire. You're the only one who can carry the pilot if we have to exfil. Rourke opened his mouth to argue. She stepped closer. Chief, she said, low enough that only he could hear. I am the most qualified person here to do this. His jaw tightened. You're a civilian. Not right now. Another explosion rocked the building. Rourke looked at Hawk, sweating, teeth clenched in pain. He looked at Jenkins, ammo running low. He looked back at Avery. How long? He asked. 20 minutes, she said. Less if I get lucky. And if you don't? She didn't answer. She reached out and took the fragmentation grenade from his vest. I'll take this, she said, and one spare mag. Rourke hesitated, then handed it over. 20 minutes, he said. After that, I'm coming for you. Avery nodded once. She didn't thank him. She slipped out the rear of the building like smoke. The moment Avery's boots hit the alley, the nurse disappeared. Her shoulders dropped. Her stride lengthened. Her awareness expanded outward, mapping angles, shadows, dead space. She moved through the village without haste, without noise. The streets were filling with fighters, men shouting, weapons slung loose, confidence high. They believed the Americans were trapped. Good, she thought. She pressed herself into a doorway as a 4-man patrol passed, arguing loudly. Amateurs. No spacing. No rear security. She waited until the last man cleared the corner. Then she moved. The knife appeared in her hand like it had always belonged there. One step, one pull, one sharp, final motion. She caught the body before it hit the ground and dragged it into the shadows. Her breath hitched once. Then she locked it down. Later, she told herself. Feel it later. The schoolhouse loomed ahead. The front entrance was covered by a heavy weapon. No chance there. Avery circled, eyes scanning. A rusted drain pipe ran up the north wall, barely anchored. It would hold. Probably. She climbed. Her ribs screamed in protest. She ignored them. Pain was just noise if you let it be. She rolled onto the second-floor balcony and slipped inside. 2 men sat at a table in the hallway, smoking, laughing. A radio console hummed between them. Avery raised the rifle. 2 suppressed shots. Both men slumped forward. She stepped over them and glanced at the map spread on the table. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a local militia op. This was coordinated. They had known the flight path. Set up, she whispered. She grabbed the radio handset. A man's voice crackled through, calm, authoritative, directing mortar fire. Avery keyed the mic and spoke in flawless, panicked cadence. Command, command. Americans at the school. They're flanking from the east. Multiple teams. Confusion erupted on the line. She fired 3 rounds into the ceiling, then smashed the radio with her rifle. Chaos would buy time. She sprinted up the stairwell to the roof. 2 guards turned in surprise. Avery dropped to one knee and fired. One fell. The other sprayed wildly, a round grazing her arm. She ignored it and put him down. The jammer sat humming beside them. She didn't bother with switches. She wedged the grenade into the battery pack, yanked the pin, and ran. The explosion tore the roof apart. The antenna vanished in a blossom of smoke and fire. Avery hit the ground hard behind a stack of sandbags, gasping. She tapped her earpiece. "Bravo, actual," she said, breathless. "Jammers down." Static cleared. Rourke's voice came through, sharp with disbelief. "Say again." "I said you've got air," she replied. "Use it." She pushed herself up and froze. A man stood in the doorway below. Not local, not sloppy, Western gear, suppressed carbine, calm eyes. He smiled. "Well," he said in a British accent, "you've been busy?" Avery's magazine clicked empty. She met his gaze, heart pounding. For the first time since the crash, she felt something close to fear. The man didn't rush her. That was the first thing Avery noticed. He stood in the doorway below the shattered roof, carbine loose but ready, posture relaxed in a way that screamed experience. Not bravado, not nerves, control, the kind earned by surviving things most people never would. "You're not local," he said conversationally, eyes flicking to the smoking remains of the antenna. "And you're definitely not medical." Avery kept the rifle shouldered, even though the bolt was locked back. Empty. She didn't lower it. "You talk too much," she said. He smiled. Not wide, not friendly. A professional's smile, acknowledgement between hunters. "Name's irrelevant," he replied, "but you can call me the man who's about to end your very bad day." She shifted her weight, subtly. The school roof was open, broken concrete everywhere. Rebar jutted up like rusted teeth. Sandbags lined one side, shredded by the blast. No cover worth trusting. Her pistol was at her hip, too slow at this distance. Her knife sat small and familiar at the small of her back, closer than she wanted. "You know," he went on, stepping forward one measured pace, "when I heard the jammer went dark, I assumed it was airstrike, or dumb luck. Then I saw you." His eyes tracked her stance. "You move like you've done this before." Avery felt her pulse in her throat. Don't rush. Make him decide. She let her shoulders sag, just a little. She dropped the rifle, let it clatter uselessly to the concrete. His eyebrows lifted a fraction. "There it is," he said softly. "The truth." She raised her hands. Let them tremble. "Please," she said, voice cracking just enough. "I'm just a contractor. I didn't sign up for this." He took another step. The muzzle dipped 2 inches. Predators relax when prey complies. "Smart," he said. "Fear keeps you alive longer." That was the half-beat she needed. Avery kicked the sandbag at her feet with everything she had. Dust and grit exploded upward. The man cursed, firing reflexively. The shot cracked past where her head had been a heartbeat earlier. She dropped low and surged forward, inside his guard. She drove the heel of her palm up under his chin. His teeth clacked together. He stumbled back, but not far enough. The buttstock of his rifle swung hard into her ribs. Pain flared white. Something cracked. She hit the concrete, breath gone. He was on her instantly. Hands like iron closed around her throat. His knees pinned her hips. The world tunneled. "Thought you were special," he snarled. "Turns out you bleed like—" Avery's hand found metal. The trauma shears. She wrenched them free and drove them down. Not at his chest, not at his neck, but into the soft hollow where his thigh met his hip. The femoral triangle. The effect was immediate. His grip vanished. His scream ripped the air. He rolled away, clutching his leg as bright arterial blood pulsed between his fingers. Avery rolled onto her side, gasping, vision swimming. She watched him for a long second. He tried to stand. He couldn't. He collapsed, shaking, the life pouring out of him faster than any bandage could stop. Avery didn't move, didn't speak. When it was over, she closed her eyes, just for a moment. Then the world came roaring back. Jets screamed overhead. The sound was enormous, biblical, the sky itself tearing open. Avery pushed herself up, ignoring the agony in her ribs. She stripped the man's rifle from his slack hands, a pristine carbine, full magazine, and checked the chamber. Loaded, she keyed her earpiece. "Bravo actual," she said. "Threat neutralized. Jammers down." Rourke's voice came back tight with relief. "Fast movers inbound, 2 mics. Copy." She stood there for a heartbeat longer, staring at the body. Then she turned and ran. And the village had become chaos. Enemy fighters poured into the streets, shouting, firing wildly. Without comms, without coordination, they were blind and angry. Avery moved like a shadow. She didn't spray, she didn't chase. She waited. A man broke cover with an RPG. 2 shots. Down. Another raised his rifle from a doorway. 1 shot. Move. The airstrike hit the mortar position with a force that shook her bones. A plume of fire and dust climbed into the sky, blotting out the sun. Avery used the confusion to sprint across the open ground. The compound door burst inward as she dove through. Rourke grabbed her by the vest and hauled her inside. "You're late," he said, voice hoarse. "Traffic," she replied, reloading. They locked eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jenkins laughed, short, disbelieving. "Holy hell." Rourke looked at Avery again, not as a liability, not as a nurse, as something else entirely. Outside, the roar of rotors grew louder. Extraction was coming. Avery leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Her hands shook now, not from fear, from what she'd had to become again. The sound of the jets faded, replaced by something closer, lower, heavier, rotors. Rourke felt it in his chest before he heard it clearly. The distant thump grew into a steady roar, the promise of escape cutting through the dust and smoke. "Bird inbound," Moose said, grinning despite the blood on his sleeve. 2 mics. "Not here," Rourke replied, scanning the broken streets through the doorway. "Courtyard's too tight. We move to the south field." "The soccer pitch?" Jenkins asked. "Only open ground we've got." Outside, sporadic gunfire cracked. The enemy wasn't coordinated anymore, but desperation made them dangerous. Small groups popped up from alleys, firing wildly, trying to salvage a kill. Rourke turned to Avery. She was kneeling beside Hawk again, hands steady as she checked his pulse. The rifle leaned against the wall within reach, but her focus was entirely medical. "How bad?" Rourke asked. "Shock's setting in," she said. "He walks 10 steps. He drops." Rourke nodded. "Then we carry him." Avery looked up. "You can't spare 2 men." "I know." She tightened the strap on Hawk's splint. "Then I'll take point." Rourke frowned. "Negative." She met his eyes. "Chief," she said quietly, "you trust me or you don't." For a long second, the only sound was the distant chop of rotors and Hawk's labored breathing. Rourke exhaled. "Fine. You lead. Jenkins, Moose, on her. We move on my mark." Avery stood, slinging the captured rifle across her chest. Her posture shifted again, not into aggression, but into responsibility. She wasn't hunting now. She was shepherding. "On 3, Rourke said. 1, 2. A round snapped past the doorway, splintering wood. "Go!" he shouted. They burst into the street. Avery moved first, rifle up, eyes scanning. She didn't sprint. She advanced, measured, reading angles. Hawk groaned as Jenkins and Moose hauled him between them. A fighter stepped from behind a burned-out car, RPG lifting onto his shoulder. Avery fired once. The man fell backward, the rocket clattering uselessly onto the pavement. "Clear left," she called. They crossed 20 yards of open ground under scattered fire, ducking behind walls, moving again. The soccer field opened ahead, a flat stretch of dirt ringed by crumbling stone. Rusted goalposts leaned like broken teeth, and above it all, descending through the smoke, came the helicopter. The HH-60 flared, rotors kicking up a blinding storm of dust. Door gunners opened fire immediately, miniguns roaring, chewing the far tree line into splinters. "Load up!" the crew chief yelled. Rourke grabbed Hawk's vest and hauled him forward. Jenkins followed, dragging Moose, who'd taken a round through the calf but refused to slow down. Avery dropped to one knee at the edge of the field, covering their movement. Her rifle barked in short, controlled bursts, never wasting a round. A fighter broke from cover, sprinting straight at the helicopter. Avery tracked him, one shot, down. "Saint!" Jenkins shouted over the noise, half laughing. "You're clear!" She didn't answer. She rose and ran, boots pounding dirt. Rourke reached out, catching her wrist, yanking her up into the bird. "Go! Go!" he slapped the bulkhead. The helicopter lifted hard, banking away as rounds snapped uselessly below. Avery found herself sitting at the edge of the ramp, legs dangling over open air. The village shrank beneath them, smoke, fire, scattered figures running without purpose. Her hands began to shake, not violently, just enough to notice. Rourke crawled toward her, bracing himself against the sway. "You good?" he asked. She nodded once, then again. "I will be." He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and ripped the red medical cross patch from her sleeve. He tossed it out into the rushing air. It vanished instantly. Avery blinked. "Hey!" Rourke pulled another patch from his pocket. Subdued colors. A simple symbol. Someone had drawn a thin halo above it in marker. He pressed it onto her shoulder. "The boys voted," he said. "We can't call you what you were, and you sure as hell aren't just a nurse." Avery looked down at the patch. "Saint," Rourke continued, "because you dragged us through hell and didn't let anyone die." Her throat tightened. She swallowed. "I don't feel like a saint." Rourke snorted. "None of us do." The helicopter turned toward the horizon, sunlight breaking through the dust cloud. Avery leaned back against the vibrating wall, eyes closing. The noise in her head, the gunfire, the screaming, the choices, slowly dulled. For the first time since the crash, she let herself breathe. The crash came later, not in the air, on the ground. Inside the sterile white trauma bay at the forward base, after Hawk had been handed off to surgeons and the doors had closed between her and the team. Avery slid down the wall, leaving a smear of dust and blood on pristine paint. Her hands trembled violently now. A young MP hovered nearby, unsure whether to help or stay back. "Ma'am," he ventured, "you can't sit here." Avery looked up at him. "I know," she said softly. She stood, legs unsteady, and followed. The room was too cold on purpose. Avery noticed it the moment the door shut behind her. Concrete walls painted a dead gray. A metal table bolted to the floor. One chair for her, two empty chairs across from her, waiting. No windows, no clock. They had taken her rifle, her vest, even the patch Rourke had given her. It sat sealed in a clear evidence bag on the table, the thin halo mocking her. She flexed her hands once, then stilled them. Shaking was weakness. Weakness invited questions. The lock clicked. 2 men entered. The first wore a Navy uniform so crisp it looked pressed by anger. Commander's rank, JAG insignia. His name tag read Harlan. The second wore a suit that didn't belong on any base Avery had ever seen. Dark, tailored, expensive without trying. No name tag, no rank. The kind of man who didn't need either. "Ms. Cole," Harlan said, not sitting. "Do you understand why you're here?" Avery kept her gaze level. "I imagine it has something to do with everyone still breathing." Harlan's jaw tightened. "This is a formal debrief. Your sarcasm is neither helpful nor appreciated." The man in the suit took the seat opposite her. He folded his hands, studying her like a specimen. "Let's start simple," he said, voice smooth. "You were contracted as a non-combatant medical specialist." "Yes." "You engaged hostile forces," Harlan continued. "You operated a designated marksman rifle. You neutralized multiple targets." Avery didn't blink. "And you destroyed enemy communications equipment," the suited man added. "With explosives." "Yes." Harlan slapped a folder onto the table. "That is a violation of your contract, potentially a violation of the rules of engagement." Avery leaned back slightly. "If I hadn't, you'd be writing condolence letters instead of paperwork." Harlan's face reddened. "That's not your decision to make." The man in the suit raised a finger, silencing him. "Commander," he said mildly, "let's not pretend this is about contracts." He turned to Avery. "Tell me something," he said. "When did you learn to read wind?" Avery's throat tightened. She said nothing. He smiled faintly. "When you threaded that suppressor, you didn't look down." Muscle memory. Interesting for a nurse. Harlan scoffed. "Irrelevant." "Not at all," the man replied. "She also improvised a deception over enemy comms. Coordinated timing with incoming air. That's not panic." He leaned closer. "That's training." Avery met his gaze. "I learned what I needed to survive." The man nodded as if she'd confirmed a theory. "And before nursing school?" Silence stretched. Harlan leaned forward. "Ms. Cole, if you do not answer—" "She doesn't have to," the suited man said. "We already know." He slid a photograph across the table. A grainy image. Avery, years younger, face hard, eyes empty. A different uniform. A different life. Her stomach clenched. "You buried that well," he continued. "New name, new license, clean slate." Avery's voice was quiet. "I earned it." "I don't doubt that," he said. "But the past has a habit of resurfacing when bullets fly." Harlan folded his arms. "This conversation is drifting." "No," the man replied. "It's arriving." He looked at Avery again. "Here's the problem. Several people want answers. Why a nurse led a tactical withdrawal. Why a jammer went dark. Why air support arrived exactly when it did." "And what happens to me?" Avery asked. Harlan answered first. "At minimum, contract termination, loss of license. At worst, charges." The suited man tilted his head. "Or none of that." Avery laughed once. It sounded hollow. "There it is." He slid a small black card across the table. No logo, no name, just a number. "We can classify the footage," he said. "Seal the reports. Make this a tragic but unremarkable extraction." Harlan frowned. "Sir?" "And in exchange," the man continued, "you come talk to us. Not today, not tomorrow, when you're ready." Avery stared at the card. "I'm done." He nodded. So you keep saying. The door banged open. Rourke limped in, boots strapped tight around his ankle, rage radiating off him like heat. End it, he growled. Now! Harlan spun. Chief Rourke, you are not authorized? Rourke threw a stack of papers onto the table. After-action reports, signed by every man on my team. The suited man raised an eyebrow. Command incapacitated, Rourke said. Authority transferred to the most qualified asset on site. That asset saved the team. Harlan scoffed. A civilian cannot assume. She wasn't a civilian, Rourke snapped. She was the reason we're not dead. Silence fell again. The man in the suit studied Rourke, then Avery. Finally, he stood. Commander, he said, drop it. Harlan stiffened. Sir? Seal the file, the man repeated. This incident never happened. He turned to Avery, setting the black card upright. The offer stands, he said. The world hasn't gotten safer while you were pretending. He walked out. Harlan gathered his folder, face tight, and followed. Rourke exhaled and sagged into the chair beside Avery. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded. You shouldn't have come. He smiled thinly. Too late. He reached into his pocket and slid something across the table. The patch. Figured it belonged to you. Avery closed her fingers around it. For the first time since the crash, she felt something like warmth. The hospital smelled wrong. Avery noticed it the moment the automatic doors slid open. Too clean, too bright. The sharp bite of antiseptic layered over old fear and tired hope. It wasn't the smell of battle. It wasn't even the smell of death. It was the smell of pretending everything was fine. She tied her hair back, clipped her badge into place, and stepped onto the ward. Morning, Avery, a nurse called from the desk. You're on triage. Avery nodded. Got it. She took the clipboard and moved. Her body remembered this rhythm. The measured steps, the neutral face, the careful distance that kept you functional. She checked vitals, reassured a man with chest pain, joked softly with a woman waiting on X-rays. She did everything right. Still, something felt off. A gurney rattled past, pushed too fast by an intern whose hands shook. The sound made Avery's shoulders tense before she could stop herself. Her eyes tracked exits automatically. Cover, angles, lines of fire. She forced herself to breathe. You're safe, she told herself. This is what you wanted. By midday, she'd stitched 3 lacerations and calmed a screaming child. Her hands were steady. Her voice was gentle. But when a metal tray clattered to the floor behind her, her heart slammed hard enough to hurt. Avery stepped into the supply room and leaned her forehead against the cool steel shelving. In for 4. Hold. Out for 4. It helped. A little. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it until the vibration stopped. Then it buzzed again. She answered. Yes? You left the card on your nightstand, the voice said calmly, the same smooth tone from the interrogation room. I thought you might want it closer. Avery closed her eyes. I told you I'm done. So did I, the man replied. Once. It didn't stick. She hung up. Her hands shook. That night she dreamed of the schoolhouse roof. Not the fight. The moment before it. The choice. She woke up sweating, heart racing, the dark unfamiliar and hostile. She sat up and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her apartment was small, neat, carefully empty. No photos, no souvenirs, no weapons, except one. The black card lay on the kitchen counter where she had left it. She picked it up. It felt heavier than paper. 2 days later, a trauma call came in just before midnight. Multi-vehicle collision, highway speeds, entrapment. The ER snapped awake. Avery moved without thinking, slipping into the flow. Blood, shouting, orders overlapping. She worked on a teenage boy with internal bleeding, fingers pressing hard to slow what they couldn't stop. "We're losing him," the resident said. "Not yet," Avery replied. She saw it, the subtle rise under the ribs, the distended vein, the failing breath. Her mind flicked to another place, another body, another ticking clock. "Tension pneumothorax," she said. "I need a needle, now." The resident hesitated. "Do it," the attending snapped. Avery did. The boy gasped. Color returned. The room exhaled. Later, as the gurney rolled away, the attending pulled Avery aside. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Avery wiped her hands. "Experience." He studied her, something like awe in his eyes. "Whatever you did before," he said. "Don't stop." The words hit harder than gunfire. Whatever you did before. She met Rourke at a bar near the base the next evening. He walked with a limp that would never fully go away. He didn't complain. "You look tired," he said. "So do you." They drank in silence for a while. "They're not done with you," Rourke said finally. "I know." "You thinking about it?" Avery turned her glass slowly. "I think about the kid in the ER. I think about the village. I think about how many times luck was the only reason we made it." Rourke nodded. "Luck runs out." She looked at him. "If I go back, I don't know if I come back." Rourke met her gaze. "You didn't really come back the first time." That was the cruel truth. She paid and stood. Outside, rain fell in a steady sheet, cold and honest. Avery let it soak her hair, her clothes, her skin. She pulled the black card from her pocket, stared at it. Then she dialed. The line clicked. "This is Avery Cole," she said. "If I say yes, no half measures, no pretending." The voice on the other end smiled through the phone. "We wouldn't insult you that way." She hung up. At dawn, Avery stood in her apartment doorway with a duffel bag at her feet. Inside it, boots, clothes that didn't belong in hospitals, and the patch Rourke had given her. She took one last look at the place she'd tried to become invisible. Then she turned away. At the terminal, she passed a TV playing the morning news. A map flashed briefly, somewhere far away, already on fire. Avery adjusted the strap of her bag and walked toward the gate. The nurse had saved lives. The woman named Saint was going back to stop wars from starting. The desert breathed at night. Not wind, breath. Warm air rising from the sand, carrying dust and old metal and something older still. Avery lay prone on the ridge, cheek pressed to cold stone, watching a compound that didn't officially exist. No flags, no markings, just concrete walls, satellite dishes, and men who moved like they believed no one was coming for them. They were wrong. Avery adjusted her optic, slow and careful. The rifle felt familiar in her hands. Not comforting, not terrifying. Honest. Below, a convoy rolled through the gate. Black SUVs, armed escorts. A man stepped out wearing civilian clothes that cost more than most villages. The reason she was here. Her earpiece crackled. "Confirm visual," a voice whispered. "Visual confirmed," Avery replied. "Target present." "Rules are clean," the voice said. "No collateral. You're green." Avery exhaled. Once rules had meant safety, now they meant responsibility. She watched the man laugh, clap someone on the shoulder, disappear into the building. He had ordered strikes from behind desks, fed lies to hungry men, profited from chaos while pretending to fix it. Avery didn't hate him. That surprised her. Hate was loud. Hate was messy. This was quieter. This was duty. She shifted position and waited. Minutes stretched. The compound lights dimmed as generators cycled. Guards changed. Patterns revealed themselves the way they always did, to those patient enough to watch. The door opened again. The man stepped out alone, phone to his ear. Avery centered the reticle on his chest. Her finger rested on the trigger. She didn't pull it. Instead, she keyed her mic. "Package is mobile." "Proceed," the voice answered. Avery rose, moving like shadow made solid. She flowed downhill across stone and scrub, closing distance without sound. She could have ended it from the ridge. She chose not to. The man never heard her until it was too late. "Don't turn around," Avery said quietly behind him. He froze. "Who?" She disarmed him with a twist of the wrist, phone clattering to the ground. He stumbled, gasping, staring at her like she was an error in the world. "Please," he whispered. "You don't know what you're doing." Avery met his eyes. "I know exactly," she said. She didn't kill him. She handed him over. By dawn, the compound was empty, hard drives seized, names extracted, deals unraveled, the kind of victory no one celebrated publicly. Avery watched from the ridge as helicopters lifted away. Saint, they would call it. A miracle. She knew better. Back home, weeks later, Avery stood in a hospital hallway again. Same smell, same lights, different weight. She wore scrubs, hair tied back, hands steady. A patient groaned behind the curtain. A nurse called her name. "Avery, Trauma Bay 2. She stepped in. Blood, panic, a life teetering. Her world narrowed the way it always did when things mattered. "Clear," someone said. She worked. Later, alone in the locker room, Avery sat on the bench and stared at her hands. They had held rifles. They had held hearts. Both had beaten beneath her fingers. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She didn't answer right away. She thought of the man on the ridge, of the boy in the ER, of Rourke's limp, of the patch folded carefully in her bag. She answered, "Yes." "We have another situation," the voice said. "Different continent, different stakes." Avery closed her eyes. "Send it," she replied. She hung up and stood. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Not the nurse who hid. Not the weapon they tried to own. Something in between. Something deliberate. Avery slipped the patch from her bag and pressed it inside her locker. Not hidden, not displayed. Waiting. She stepped back into the hallway. Patience needed her, so did the world. Saint walked forward, not as an angel, but as a choice.